How do you decide how much to make in Satisfactory? The game has no time limits, no production speed goals, and no wrong way to reach the end of the game as long as you deliver the requested items eventually. But it's a question I see online all the time, from newer players who wonder if they're doing enough to veteran players who want to know the best way to play. So in this video, I've set out to tell you how small or large you should aim to make your factories based on how much you want to put into the game, and I'll give some exact numbers whenever possible. The Dabbling Pioneer. Many Satisfactory players have saves that number in the thousands of hours, but that doesn't mean you have to dedicate your life to this game like an MMO. A lot of players would probably prefer to keep this to an under 100-hour game, and maybe this isn't what you want to hear if you're looking for that quick gaming experience, but that's going to be pretty difficult. At minimum, I would expect 100 hours, and probably more, unless you really only focus on the core objectives and ignore most other things. This is a big game, and things progress slowly. But if this sort of minimal level of gameplay is your preference, then here are my recommendations for you. Most likely, the goal numbers seem pretty daunting, but the milestones in the game are one-time costs, not continuous requirements, so you only need to meet them one time. New players might stress about the numbers too early and want to calculate everything out, but it's really not necessary if you follow a basic structure during your whole playthrough. Early game, you should aim to systematically harvest every resource node in the immediate area and use them in production, starting from your starting area. Having as many resources and production lines as possible from the start will be helpful as you continue on, as you don't want too much idle time in the beginning. The more you build now, the faster those early milestones will go. You should never be still in the early game. Always be moving and expanding. Whenever you unlock a new item to build, start at least one machine making it and put storage containers after them. Stockpile the materials, that way you won't have a shortage later on if you've underestimated how much you need. This kind of buffering system will save you a ton of time in the early game when you don't really know what you're doing yet. Ordinarily, I would recommend destroying and rebuilding starter factories and then making them better and more organized, but if you're trying to just get through the game, this might not be necessary. Of course, it depends on how much you like to be organized, but you should prioritize belt speed upgrades and maximizing the usage of resource nodes over aesthetics. If you do want to be somewhat organized, I would recommend a manifold system, which is a continuous line of machines that are fed off of a single belt using splitters. As you get access to faster belts, you can just upgrade that one belt and add more machines with minimal effort, so you don't have to spend time rebuilding or creating a whole new factory from scratch. As you move out of the early game, I think there's a pretty simple answer to how many of an item to produce, and it's my main advice for this playstyle. And that is, when you're starting to produce something, pick a node or a cluster of nearby nodes, and aim to use their maximum output based on the miner type and belt speed you currently have access to. Are there a pair of bauxite nodes near each other? Great, make as much aluminum as you can from them, using those nodes as your bottleneck. And if the result isn't fast enough for you, you can seek out more nodes, which is why it's good to use the expandable manifold system when possible. Of course, this also changes depending on what miners and belts you have unlocked, so again, there's no perfect number, but keep easy expansion in mind so that you can easily add on more production without starting from scratch. As a rule of thumb, expand production when your current amount feels painful, but don't invest a bunch of time in a mega factory that you don't need to. It's kind of the same advice of never staying still. Don't waste time staring at your machines waiting for them to finish. Always be going on to the next project. If you build too small at first, at least you'll have something being produced while you work on expanding, as opposed to having a lot of downtime if you aim to build a mega factory. As far as the super basic items like screws and plates, you'll probably never know how many you're making, and that's because they're so common that you'll be making them all over the world in different production lines. Making plates in one location and sending them everywhere is inefficient compared to making them more locally. So when it comes to the basics, don't worry about how many you need, and don't worry about having a dedicated iron plates factory. Instead, focus on the more complex items and work backwards to see what you need for them. Some of the space elevator requirements ask for a pretty complex production chain and are slow to produce, but you don't really need that many of them. Look at the space elevator item modular engine, for example. The space elevator asks for 500 of them, but a single machine only produces one per minute. That means if you only made that one machine, it would take about 8 hours to hit that goal. That's a great reason to expand the production line based on how much quicker you want it to be, and you can have a dedicated space elevator part factory that's messy and just produces as needed. If progression is your goal, prioritize the production of these items so they can build in the background while you expand your power grid or hunt for power slugs, because they're gonna take a long time. Just be sure to hook up these production lines to your space elevator so you can see the numbers going up and know when it's time to pull the lever and move on to the next stage. When it comes to the more advanced components of the game that are built by the manufacturer, just 1 or 2 machines producing that item is often enough for this playstyle. Yes, making just a couple of heavy modular frames or turbo motors per minute is very slow, but you don't need that many under normal circumstances. This is especially true if you're willing to shunt an output somewhere else when you're done with it. For example, heavy modular frames go into the space elevator part adaptive control unit, and fused modular frame, which itself goes into another space elevator part. So send the heavy modular frames to storage for building things like the blender and drone ports, but when you're working on those space elevator parts specifically, just build a new belt and send them to work on that. This of course requires a bit more manual intervention and an understanding of your factory and where you put everything, but it does result in less factory building. And when it comes to a fairly complex item like heavy modular frames, I wouldn't blame you for only wanting to set that up once. Mid-tier items like computers are used occasionally in buildables and more advanced items, so you might want to make 3 or 4 manufacturers of them instead of just 1 or 2. But of course, this will depend on what you're doing. That's just kind of a general advice. Meanwhile, on the advanced end of the spectrum, something like nuclear pasta is only tied to progression, so you really only need 1 machine for this, and of course you can expand as needed if you want to speed up the end of the game. The Hardcore Pioneer. For players who are ready and willing to spend hundreds or even thousands of hours on their Satisfactory save and build huge mega factories, the math changes quite a bit. It's no longer how can I make this item, but rather how big can I go. This playstyle has a much simpler answer for determining how much to make, but it's also more vague of an answer, and that is by starting from the end and working backwards. Decide how much of an end product you'd like to make, and then do the math so that you can reach that number. Arriving at that number is the hard part though, and it's why this question exists in the first place. Many players set an arbitrary multiple of 10 items or 10 machines, or something that maximizes a certain resource in the world. Often the number is arbitrary. You pick it because it seems fun or cool or seems like it's enough. There's no magic number, and maybe that's a disappointing answer. I will have some numbers in a bit, but there isn't one amount that's going to be right for every player. Projects of this scale really benefit from third-party tools, namely Satisfactory Modeler and Satisfactory Calculator. Use Satisfactory Modeler to insert the output number you want, then work backwards to see how much of the prerequisite items you need. Then use Satisfactory Calculator to see if your goal even makes sense based on the amount of certain resources that exist on the map. You can also use the interactive map to see where the biggest concentration of relevant resources even is, which helps you decide the most ideal location for your factory. Yes, you can technically use in-game knowledge to get all these numbers and locations, but the third-party tools will make it way easier to imagine things on the correct scale. Planning like this will help you avoid the common frustrating loop of Satisfactory, where you think you've made enough computers and then suddenly you need to make more radio control units and don't have enough computers for them, so you have to add a whole new manufacturer along with all the production lines to make the prerequisites. You're expecting to spend a lot of time in the game, yes, but that time should still be spent efficiently, if you want to enjoy creating those massive factories. When trying to decide what scale you're going for, here are some rough numbers based on manufacturers making items like computers or heavy modular frames, which I consider to be a reasonable benchmark as these are mid to late game items. A normal long playthrough would probably have 5 to 10 manufacturers throughout the world making each of these items, which allows for comfortable construction of more advanced items, an always full dimensional depot for making additional advanced buildings, and maybe even a little extra that can be overflowed into the awesome sink to get more tickets. In this playstyle, you're spending enough time on other tasks that these production lines are likely to back up rather than get used up. A large factory might use between 10 and 30 manufacturers for each item, which can supply a larger amount of endgame materials. These endgame materials might mostly end up in the awesome sink so you can get tickets, as items like supercomputers are only used in some specific space elevator items in advanced buildings. Most players on this scale want to get a really long experience out of the game, or maybe are doing a second playthrough and realize that they have the ability to build a lot bigger. But for the true Satisfactory psychopaths, you could easily have 50 or more manufacturers busting out high-tier items. Why? Not to beat the game faster, not to build something specific, but just to say that you did it. These are the kinds of factories you might post on Reddit to brag about. And honestly, no matter how seriously you're taking the game, sometimes the right production rate is just whatever sounds impressive. Anyone can make 5 modular frames per minute, but don't you want to be the one to make 50 per minute? Yeah, you just might. If you're more of a builder and want to spend a ton of time making cool looking factories, you can get away with making one machine's worth of most of the endgame items because honestly, the slower production rate is irrelevant. You'll spend so much time in the game that a factory will passively serve its purpose long before you've built its beautiful shell. Just build a heck of a lot of concrete, silica, and quartz for those foundations, windows, and signs that you'll need so much of. In terms of logistics for these kinds of mega factories, that also depends on your playstyle, but in general, I would recommend building as locally as possible. Rather than making every iron plate in one spot and transporting them all around, instead make those basic items on-site and independent from the rest of the world. Things can get confusing when you need half to go to one place and the rest to several others. Keep it simple and keep it modular if possible. That means that even if you do have a central mega factory, you're only sending mid and high tier items there, while all of the super basic items are mostly staying in their own little modules being locally made. This method keeps logistics simple and expandable, and it keeps belts and highways from randomly crisscrossing over each other as you add more. However, if you're going for a mega factory, you might want an expansive train network that focuses on the rule of cool more than pure efficiency. Just always consider expandability. And understand that choices like that will introduce more points of failure, but that they'll make your save that much more interesting. And if you're this kind of player, you're probably going for impressive, different, standout, more than just pure efficiency in trying to beat the game. And, needless to say, blueprints of commonly used factory setups or decorative elements are going to save you a ton of time and, more importantly, tedium, which you'll probably want even if you don't blink at a 1,000-hour save file. In Satisfactory, the right amount of an item to make is not determined by the recipe, but by what kind of pioneer you want to be. Do you want to get the job done with speed, feel satisfied at your playthrough, and move on to the next game in your Steam library? Or do you want to have an extended stay on Massage 2 ABB and build yourself a factory you can be proud of? Only you can answer that question, but I hope my explanations in this video helped you make sense of how big you can go and got you closer to a number that sounds right for your playstyle. Let me know in the comments where you land, like the video if it helped, and I hope to see you in the next Satisfactory News video.